engineering, and then we also have a presentation from water. So why don't we start with engineering and do that one first?
Okay, good afternoon, councilors. Mary Radisson, city engineer. I just have one item, which is related to the Salt City Market project at 484 South Salina Street. In order to meet the county's 101 sanitary offset, we're asking Salt City Market to line 3 sewer manholes along the 400 block of South Salina Street. So this is just a way to meet the sanitary sewer offset as a result of the development of the project. And it's pretty standard language. And they've agreed to the terms and conditions.
Any questions from any of the councilors?
No.
I'm comfortable with it. I know Councilor Carney, you're on the committee as well. Are you good with it?
I don't have any questions or anything. I'm fine with that going forward.
And then
Councilor Carney, you your email didn't go through because your email's full. I didn't know if you were aware of that.
Yeah, I use a different email. I can give that to you if you'd like, but yeah, I have a different email that I use.
Oh, okay, yeah, if you could email me, that'd be great.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Councilors Rudd and Majuk, are you good to move this forward?
I'm okay with it, Councilor Green. I joined late, a minute late. What was it?
This is, Mary, do you want just 30 seconds?
Yep, it's Salt City Market, 44 South Salina Street, as part of the county's requirement for the 101 sanitary sewer offset. As a result of the development, they're going to line 3 sewer manholes in the 400 block of South Salina Street.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Awald, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. So our request is for a 4% rate increase, and I have a little presentation I'd like to show, just to kind of give an overview of what that means for the water department. So let's see if I can do this here.
You will likely end up doing this in your budget hearing too. Is that
correct?
Fine.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. I just wanted to. So can everyone see the PowerPoint slide? So if you,
yes.
All right, good. So I'm going to proceed here. So here, just wanted to go through this and give a little bit of information on what we're looking at for a rate increase and why, and then start the conversation on some additional revenue we could be looking at to offset any kind of deficiencies in our budget for the upcoming years. So real quick, I won't read everything on the slides, but background information on the system and our revenue history and projected expenses going out to fiscal year 24, what the rate increase we're looking at, what it means to us, and then some additional other revenue conversation pieces I think we should have. So the system as a whole, obviously we do 550 miles of distribution main, over 5,000 hydrants, over 7,000 valves. So we have a lot of stuff that we maintain on a daily basis and repair. Now, prior to fiscal year 19, the water department operating expenses exceeded the revenues, so we had to pull into our reserve funds. And also, we're projecting in this fiscal year 20 that we're probably going to have to draw on our reserve by about 60,000. Previous years was more. This fiscal year 20, we're just about equal. So 60,000 isn't too bad. But there's several reasons why we are in this current situation. Prior to 19, the water rates weren't adjusted for several years. And we've also had a decline in water sales, which is a huge component, and I'll show that on the next upcoming slide, a huge component of our revenue stream. There's also been labor and benefits increase And we've increased efforts in the watershed through monitoring and testing of HABs in the last couple of years. So this gives you a basic breakdown of our customer usage, residential and commercial, and no bill, which is school properties and schools, city properties and schools. As you can see from those 3 years, there's a steady decline in consumption. So as you can see, a steady decline in consumption, since almost 94% of our budget is based on water sales. That has a direct correlation to what our revenue is. The chart on the bottom kind of gives an overview of all of our expenses and their category. So our expenses by category between operation and maintenance, cash capital, existing debt service, and future debt service on planned projects. As you can see, the steady incline up to fiscal year 24. The bottom chart was a chart prepared by our consultant that if we did not have a rate increase and looked at different ways to raise revenue over time, we're going to have to be pulling on our reserves more and more every year. As expenses increase, our revenue would be declining because our consumption is declining. So the rate increase. So we're proposing a 4% rate increase.
You just go back to that other slide for 1 second and just show the reserve.
Right there.
The reserve is the dotted line in the lower chart.
Correct.
So you're forecasting if you don't have a raise, what would you show it?
Correct. So you can see the green.
Basically,
the
difference between the pink and the green gets subtracted from the blue line each time. That will happen.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So we're proposing a 4% rate increase. So on a single family household, the average annual usage based on our rate study was 78,500 gallons per year. So that would translate to about a $12 increase per year for a single family household. Now, since 94% of our budget is based on consumption, the bigger users would pay more than the $12. So like your commercial and industrial type of users, they consume more, they would pay more. This is estimated to generate between $270,000 to about $400,000 for the year. This should allow us to balance our fiscal year 21 budget, and because we've had an increase in debt service because the projects we're taking on, just the cost of materials, the cost of health insurance, and the additional debt. Oh, excuse me. Somebody have a question?
I'll take the opportunity to ask a question. How many water meters do you have? Does the water department have?
We have approximately 34,500 water accounts.
Commissioner, this might be not something you know the answer to, but the water usage and the correlation between wealth and water usage, how does that relate? I mean, do wealthier households use more water because they have bigger houses, or do they have more efficient, appliances that use less? I'm just not sure how that works.
That's an interesting question. I don't think we've looked at it in that perspective. I know over the years, water conservation efforts have reduced the average person's water consumption because of water-saving fixtures, water-saving toilets, high-efficiency washing machines, and all that type of stuff. So your average household is, being more efficient, so that reduces our revenues and reduces the consumption, which then in turn reduces our revenue. But I don't know if there's a direct correlation to household income and usage.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, is this a regressive be? I guess I just don't really have a good understanding of that, but it might be a difficult question.
That's an interesting, I'll see if we can take a look at that, but that's interesting.
Councilor Green, a question,
Yes, sir.
if you don't mind. I know I'm not a part of this committee, but I just have to ask this one if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
You know, just, and I don't want to be presumptuous here, Commissioner, but I would assume that some consideration has been given to the financial capacity of most households in the city when thinking about raising fees. And, you know, while I understand the idea that revenue is limited because people are conserving more, they're conserving more to save money, you know, not for the city to try to get it some other way when they have to stop spending, you know, or when they create a situation where they can save money. And I, you know, maybe I'm missing something, but didn't we just raise the water rates?
Yes, we raised them 4% last year. So this is kind of the predicament we're in because rates haven't been raised over the last 15 years. So now we're playing catch up. Because typically,
Can you, in your slide, you use the word several?
Yeah,
Show us the rate increases over time. That would be more helpful.
Let me
The
finish
10-year, 15-year period.
Councilor Rod, hold on a second, man. Let me finish this thought for a second. Rates haven't been raised because unemployment was at 14% for people 25 and older in the city. That's 20,000 able-bodied, non-working people. So there's a reason why we weren't increasing fees on the populace because we haven't had increases in employment. And let's be clear, not to be confused with the numbers they tend to promote from the county that somehow, I don't know how, I think their number is somewhere around 3%, but the city is still at 10.7% unemployment overall, and it's higher than 14% now for people 25 and older. So we're not making more money in the city.
correct. And that's you know, I understand that point and that concern. And, you know, typically what you would see utilities do is raise their rates like 1% per year, you know, because cost of materials and the cost of doing business increases, you got to kind of stay current. And that wasn't done. The rates were increased in 2010. Rates were then only increased in 2017. So we had a 17-year gap that rates weren't keeping up with inflation. So we're proposing, you know, 4% rate increase. That's be like $12 a year for your average household. That's $3 every quarter.
I understand that the idea is that the number sounds low, but we just raised taxes. We already raised the water rate. There's other increased costs that other departments are asking for in one respect or another. You know, I always say for the administration, we have to take into consideration what our capacity is as a city financially. You know, you can't continually put people who are, you know, a large number of whom are in the poorhouse further into the poorhouse. You know, so just especially when we're talking about seniors who are already struggling to avoid coming on our agenda for seizure for an inability to pay their property or their water, because the water becomes an issue as well. We put them in a further predicament. They're not getting any increases in their flat Social Security or anything. You understand? They're not getting any increases. Their money stays the same. You know, so for those persons who are retired and still living, you know, 20, sometimes 30 years, what do when they get priced out of their homes by the government? The government can't be guilty of putting people out of their homes. That's all I got, Counselor.
Councilor Rudd, do you want to ask a question?
Any other question other than having the rate increase data over time, like in a chart? Is there a number that's like an upper limit of what we can sell in theory? Like, it seems like it's a good thing that we actually use less water. Is there a point when we start harming the lake? Like, how much capacity do we have if we had more people or something like that?
So we are permitted by the state to withdraw from the lake 58 million gallons a day. That's our maximum limit. Right now, we draw on average 32 to 36, and on the high consumption days, you know, we get close to 42. So we have plenty of capacity to draw from the lake to meet our demand. But as the years have gone by, industry has left that had that huge demand, so we have less consumption overall in the city.
Are there ways to market ourselves for that 10 million, whatever, 10, 15, 16 million of extra capacity, million gallons of extra capacity a day, to market that toward like industrial, whatever, commercial uses, to bring more payers in, to have our system grow that way?
Yeah, I mean, we still have one of the lowest rates, water rates in the area, in the region. Well, there was a comparison done, I think I still have the chart somewhere of different water utilities in the region, and we are one of the lowest. I guess we got to promote ourselves in that aspect.
Yeah, just thought. Thank you.
Good thought.
It's Joe.
Go ahead, Council.
So, Commissioner, I understand your reason of wanting to raise the rate here. You said, if I understand you correctly, you said that you had to go back into reserve to get $60,000 just to balance the budget.
That's what we're projecting for this ending this fiscal year, end of
Okay,
June this year.
What was it last year?
Last year, we actually broke even.
You broke even. So this year is the first. It's the first time to go into the reserve by $60,000.
No,
So,
previous years, there's been draws on reserves of $1 million, $1.5 million, I believe. That was prior to me being commissioner.
okay, so I take whatever you are doing for the last year, and this year is somewhat working. I take. What I'm getting at, Commissioner, is I can agree with what Councilor Bay was saying, and I want to take it as far as saying that, you know, the need in our city, we know we have members in our community that can't really afford to pay for their daily living. Yes, 4% is small. You know, $3 every month is that come to $1 a month per an individual. But you know, we don't want to get in the habit of just keep raising things. What I would suggest, since all you need for the year is $60,000, instead of doing 4%, why not 2% instead of 4%?
So we settled on 4% is because of the water rate study that was done in 2019 by our consultant to project forward what we would need to sustain and keep a balanced budget based on the rising cost of projects that we have to do, materials and labor increases, and our debt service. So they've laid out a proposal for a series of rate increases to make sure that we can balance our budget and get these critical projects, infrastructure projects, completed.
Yeah, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, instead of jumping to 4%, can you start a little bit lower or something like that, instead of We have seen what 4% can project already, and seemed to me that since last year we broke even, this year we are above. We had to go into our reserve for $60,000 instead of just doing that and getting into a habit of just raising rates because, I think a smart budget management and smart spending is a key here, in which you have been from last year to this year. It seems like you have been looking at it critically, in which I applaud you for that. But I just think jumping to 4% at once, I think is, considering the position our community people are in, is somewhat uncomfortable for me.
Okay.
Done, Counselor.
Thank you. Commissioner, why don't you go through the rest of this, and then we'll give some time for questions after you go through the presentation.
Okay. And I'll get some more information on some of those comments and questions as well. Okay. So you have the rate increase, but then we were looking at some additional revenue conversation starters, which would be a service fee increase. We already have service fees. We already have annual fire service fees and hydrant or service demolition fees. So the water service and meter installation fees are fees for new services and new meter installations. Our current charges do not cover our costs to do these. And the annual fire service fees are fees that we charge large consumers that have dedicated fire services to their buildings, typically commercial industrial properties, and they are an unmetered connection. So if they have a fire, their fire connection opens up, and we feed as much water into these facilities as they need to fight the fire, and there's no recouping any of that cost. Service demolition fee is the cost to terminate a service at the water main. So when a building gets ripped down, or somebody's ripping down old buildings to build new apartment buildings, we have to go in and remove all those old services and then install new ones. So all those that aspects of work have a cost associated with them. So the service and meter install fees, it varies depending on size, but the last time that fee was updated was in 1992, and it currently doesn't cover our cost. The annual fire service fee was last updated in 1999, and that varies depending on the size of your fire service. Same with the service demolition fee. That's a flat fee no matter what size service it is, and that was last updated in 1992. So to give you kind of comparison on what we're looking at, the current fee for a 1-inch service to install is about $1,000. Our actual costs are up around $4,100. And, just to start the conversation, we were thinking about proposing a fee, increasing the current fee for a 1-inch service to about $1,500. Because every time we perform this, we actually lose several $1,000s for every ounce of work we do. The annual fire service fee, we were looking at a small incremental increase for the smaller users, and the bigger users that require the bigger infrastructure, which costs more to maintain and repair in the system, they would be paying a little bit more than the smaller users. And so a service demolition, right now it's a flat fee for no matter what it is of $1,000. Our actual cost to do it is just over $3,500. So we're basically proposing for a 3/4 inch service demo of $1,500. Any questions?
Commissioner, can I ask a question? This is Pat Hogan.
Sure.
Commissioner, I mean, when you, so when a developer comes and builds a modest-sized building, you guys go in there and put in the water service for them, correct?
We put it up to the curb
To the
box.
curb. Okay. And that's what you're talking about, the cost associated with that?
Correct.
Okay, but that's a set flat fee. It's not predicated on what you actually have to do to, I mean, what it actually costs the water department, right?
So the service install depends on the size of the service. So if you're getting a 1-inch versus a 2-inch versus a 6-inch, there's a scale associated with that. But that scale, no matter where you are and what size service, does not cover the cost we incur doing that service.
Okay, so you want to adjust that, obviously. But could you adjust?
Right. We want to
It can't be on a
adjust
case-by-case basis, correct?
Correct. I mean, adjust each service installation fee based on the different sizes, adjust them incrementally. Now, to cover our costs, we'd have to increase that fee by like 300%, and that's just not doable on any level. So we're looking at small increments just to start recouping some of that cost that we incur.
Why isn't it doable the other way, what it actually costs you?
I think that would really, like for the 1-inch service, that may be a residential development. You're talking like the 6-inch service. Now you're talking a bigger complex. Let
me give you an example, Commissioner. Give me keep on building bigger and bigger buildings up to Syracuse University. Like an install for one of those places. Why couldn't you just charge them for exactly what it costs the city of Syracuse to do it?
Well, yeah, so we're looking, I mean, I just gave the example on a 1-inch, but we're looking at the bigger services get installed, recouping the bulk of that cost because they're the bigger users. Now, if it's an 8-inch or larger, we typically bill them the cost of whatever it is, just because it's so large. You can't really set a flat fee on that.
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Why wouldn't you just charge it for what it exactly costs you instead of having a flat fee at all?
I think it's for that that 1-inch service that you may get a lot of. It's too steep of a price.
Okay.
And I think the bigger users should pay a little bit more into the system.
Well, that's what I think too. I mean, as far as, and you mentioned that you weren't sure why the water usage was lower. I think Councilor Bay is on to what actually is happening out there. But do you have any other supposition at all why the usage is lower?
I think the usage is lower because our population has declined, and with the water conservation efforts, it's a combined thing. You just don't have the industry here like we used to have. Back when the system was running in its prime, they were pulling 50 million gallons a day from the lake because you had a lot of industry here that was heavy users. A lot of the industry that is here now is looking at reuse and conservation efforts, so you just don't have that big demand that you had years ago.
Okay.
Commissioner, I guess to start, can you email us this PowerPoint?
Sure, I can do that.
And then, my next question is going back to the fees that we're talking about. What's the scale of this? If it were to be implemented, how much revenue?
So if we were looking at the service and meter fee, the annual fire service fee, and then the demolition fee, we could estimate based on the average numbers of services and stuff we've done over the last couple of years, about $150,000.
And I think, going through your presentation initially too, I mean, for one, we want people installing new stuff. Obviously, that means there's development. It means they're going to be water customers. It means they're going to be probably paying more in taxes. But for the service reductions, obviously that means it's a bad thing that they're knocking down a building. Do they have a choice? I mean, if we were to charge them more, what option would they have? Don't they have to use us for this?
Yeah, I mean, you got to kind of, to demo that service, if you have more services you leave kind of out in the system that aren't hooked to anything, you're increasing your potential of leaking in the future. We've found numerous services that were how they would, demolish them in the past because it was easy, is just crimp the ends and walk away. Well, now we're coming back to those services after they blow out or the crimp cracks, and now we have to dig up the street or a yard to take care of a service that wasn't feeding anything. So we've incurred costs that has no way to recoup that. Any other questions or anything?
I do have a question. So would you be able to, because I'm assuming that, so since we have a tax delinquent problem here in the city of Syracuse, I would assume that we also have a delinquency in payments through the water department as well, right? So
Correct, yes.
So we have a lot of people that don't pay their water bills or they have past due. So I'm just logically, I don't get the logic of increasing the water bill if you already have delinquencies in water bill payments. So would you be able to kind of give us some numbers? You may not be able to do it today, but you can email it, of like how much money is sitting out there for past due water bills. Because if the I would assume that the number is significantly high. And so if the number is already high, why would we increase it further? So just my position on this, I can't support another increase. One, we already had an increase, and two, people can't afford what they're already supposed to pay. So why would we increase it anymore? So.
Councilors, this is Corey. If I can just jump in for a second. I don't, this isn't certainly a decision that we take lightly. And I think that, obviously if historically we had followed the advice that Councilor Majok suggested, and we had done incremental small increases over the last 15 years, we likely wouldn't be in the position that we are now. So, if we really wanted to be investing all that we need to be investing and want to be investing in our water infrastructure, we would raise the rates a lot more than 4%, but we understand that's a hardship on folks. And so it's a balance that we're trying to strike. So, we want to work with the council to find where that balance is, but these are services that we're providing. Labor costs continue to go up, materials continue to go up. We don't want all of that cost, obviously, in one fell swoop to fall on our residents, but we're trying to strike a balance there between, I wouldn't say it's the vast majority of folks that can't afford their water bill, but there are folks that understandably have hardships, and we'd be happy to explore. A lot of other municipalities have a program where when you pay your water bill, you add in an extra $1 to go towards a hardship fee to help those folks who can't pay for their water bills in the community. So, it's just that as costs continue to go up, we need to be charging folks a little bit more, and what that little bit is open for discussion. We thought 4% was a reasonable balance where it's $3 a quarter for the average user, but I just don't want you to think that we took the decision lightly, and we know that there's a hardship, and we'd be more than happy to explore other ways that we can address that as well. I mean, we don't do the shutoffs anymore, which, I think is something everybody supported, but as a result of that, we don't collect as much money in delinquent water payments as we used to. That's a price that I think we were willing to pay to make sure that tenants don't go without water, but that There's just a financial reality here that I know that you all are well aware of. Again, it's just a balance that we're trying to strike here.
If I could maybe add another thing, I want to say I can appreciate that, Corey, except we just raised a bunch of other fees, right? And right now, I'm gonna be very candid here. The government is looking very predatory. Like if there's only so much food on the table, doesn't matter how much you want to offer the table. There's only so much you can pull from. And even if we have people right now who can't pay, you're going to create more people who can't pay later. You don't know what the average person's threshold is. But what we do know is what the median income is in this city. What we do know is what the infant mortality rate is in this city. Those things we do know. So I'm trying to understand how we squeezing all of this money out of a populace where our job market has not improved. The income levels have not improved, and population right now, as far as I know, is still flat. But I mean, we keep raising fees, it's probably going to decline. That puts us in a worse predicament. And it seems in some ways that we're now going to ultimately penalize people for conserving water, which is, that's what people wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's how else do we continue to fund city services? We're just trying to, like I said, it's a balance to strike. There is a tipping point where it gets to be too much and it's unsustainable. We thought that $3 a quarter as an increase is not unsustainable if you own a home. $1 a month, we didn't believe was unsustainable for folks. I understand that that's just water rate fees and we need to look at the whole picture. And that's what the entire budget process is for, because the increases don't just exist in water if we want to raise rates elsewhere. So I know we have to look at it at the big picture, but I just...
Well, the point I'm getting to, I don't mean to cut you, Corey, but we already raised water. We already raised taxes. So it's not like we're only raising water. We already had people calling us about increased tax costs. Then we had people calling about their assessments going up, right? So all of this seems like a gigantic money grab to me, where we're trying to find every penny we can. Now, understand, and I guess my position is government exists for the purpose of providing business and doing services on behalf of people. It doesn't exist to make income within itself, for its own sustainability, if you will, and or profit. So, I mean, like, how well are we doing for people if we're injuring them at the same time? And while we know,
I understand. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I understand. And while we know that there are, without a doubt, we know, you can't create a circumstance where everybody is safe. We know that. Mm-hmm. But it seems like the financial ability of the people who live here is not being taken into account. Mm-hmm. And just because, for example, I won't point at anybody on this screen, but the gentleman next door to me can pay water, or just because I can pay water, don't mean that the senior citizen diagonal to me can pay her water, right? And so, and a big problem that we run into, to Councilor Allen's point, to the point I made earlier, is right alongside of tax delinquency is an inability to pay water. And at one point, we were forcing people to move out of their houses because their water was shut off, right? And so, you have, and then let me add this: if they have an outstanding bill, they can't even get a tax trust. They got to pay the water bill first in order to even get into a tax trust. So we're creating, understandably in some respects, a lot of stipulations and regulations to try to get people to do right. But you still can't ignore the ones who are trying to do right but just don't have capacity. And those are usually the more vulnerable populations. We can't ever remove that from the conversation. I'm not assuming that is being done, but man, I'm sure it looks like that to them.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if our water infrastructure were in great condition and this were just icing on the cake for us to get a little bit extra money from residents, then I could understand it being characterized as a money grab. It's just that the needs of our water infrastructure continue to increase. While the amount of money that we collect, which is how the water department is funded, if there were a way to fund it differently so that it wasn't based on water use, I think Commissioner Awald and everybody would embrace that opportunity. But, and Commissioner Awald has done a terrific job at seeking out grants and seeking out opportunities so that the improvements that need to be made aren't just coming from the water revenue source, but as the need continues to increase and the need to put money into our water infrastructure increases, and the department is funded by money collected based on how much people use water, it's just, it's a difficult problem to solve. And like I said, we're just trying to strike a balance here. Obviously, the need is much greater than 4%, but we thought 4% might be a reasonable level. And that's why we have these hearings, to talk about whether or not you agree with us on that point, and see where we land. So I just didn't want it to come across as a money grab or a decision that we came across cavalier and didn't really care, what kind of impact it would have on people. It's just that as we're facing the need of our water infrastructure and water rates, to your point, Councillor Bay, it's a good reason. There were good reasons why water rates weren't increased. But the gap, the delta now is so large that we're trying to do incremental increases to try and get us back up where we can invest in the water infrastructure the way that we need to, so we can deliver safe drinking water to the residents.
I understand. I'm gonna be honest, and let me crack my joke. It's looking real Trumpish in Syracuse right now. Let me add this as well, though. Maybe consideration should be given to an understanding that the governor did not want to fund infrastructure. Then maybe there should be consideration given to a jobs program related to infrastructure. That way, it's an investment from the governor's perspective instead of just money, and you can employ people to improve our infrastructure and put people back to work. It has a greater chance for long-term sustainability instead of this every year trying to penny, nickel and dime poor people or people who are almost poor for money that they don't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and as long as you don't accuse me of collusion, then I won't take the Trump. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I think also Commissioner Ewald is trying to, and I think that's where these fee increases come in, is that targets the commercial and industrial, the large users that we have, the universities, the hospitals, the industry that we do have in the city, so that we're not solely filling this delta on the backs of residences. So I hope that there's, that Commissioner Ewald has put consideration into making sure that all of our users, particularly our large users, are sharing the cost that we need to try and fill to invest in the infrastructure.
I just wanted to add real quick that, and piggyback off Corey's statement, that right now that the bulk of the water sales is coming from residential, and we need to have some mechanism now to shift that towards the bigger users, because we do not have as many big users in the system like we used to. The other point of, not expecting people who are on fixed income to pay more than they can, that was one of the things we looked at within this water rate study, is how many households were using at the minimum or below the minimum. So if we're looking at charging a current rate is $41.11 per quarter, and we're proposing 4%, that would change it to $41.76, I think, per quarter. If they're still below that minimum, the increase for those people below the minimum is only going to be 50, 60 cents per quarter. So, but we'll look at those numbers and get a little bit more detail for you in that avenue.
Commissioner, how many of the 34,000 folks are city residential as opposed to commercial?
I don't have that number in front of me, but I can get that information for you.
Commissioner Pat Hogan again. So you still transfer about 2.3 to the general fund every year, or that's what you're projecting?
Correct.
Okay. And we've looked at that too, right?
Looked at that how?
Well, looked at that. I mean, that obviously could go a long way to addressing some of your needs, correct?
Correct. I mean, that's a transfer to the general fund that's taken and planned within our budget.
Yeah. Well, that's a normal transfer, in other words. I remember that being the case.
Aren't there services tied to it that the city does? Or is it just a money grab?
I would have to look at.
Historically, Councilor Rudd, it was somewhat a specious grab, I guess you'd say. I mean, what is in the Water Reserve Fund right now, Commissioner?
The reserve fund, I do not have that number in front of me right now. I believe, again, I'd have to get that number to confirm that number with you later on.
I mean, have we talked to Commissioner D.P.W about the possibility of bonding more to address some of these problems as far as infrastructure goes, or what?
I mean, we've been tackling projects and upgrading our infrastructure for the last couple of years. You'll see it in the budget presentation that I have, that this past year we've been able to secure almost $3 million in grants to help upgrade infrastructure. The latest and greatest project that's coming on, going to be, shovels hitting the ground here in the next month or so, is the Morningside Reservoir Dome roof reconstruction and facility improvements. That was, I think it was $2.5 million construction award, and we were able to secure $2.1 million in grants. So we've been really aggressive at going after different funding sources to help, knock the cost down of these capital projects that are just absolutely necessary.
I'm not being critical of you in any way, Commissioner. I'm just saying that I agree with Councilor Bay and Councilor Allen, and regarding this, sort of a nickel and dime approach. I rather like to see us not having to go to the public and ask them for a few dollars more, as they say. But I guess we'll suspend this conversation until your budget presentation.
I have one more comment at risk of being redundant. But given the COVID-19 situation, and I think there will be many opportunities, and it seems like the supply chain of production is going to change a lot. Like, I do think there's probably opportunities to market the excess capacity in our system to, I don't know if like industrial or commercial uses. I do think there's going to be a reorientation of things, and we should view it as an opportunity. And those were traditionally how municipalities used to use the commercial and industrial properties to subsidize and minimize the payments for residential folks. So at some point we kind of went away from that, but I do think there's going to be a shift that might make this an opportunity, and we have the capacity, so why not?
Good point.
Right, and we have plenty of capacity. The next thing we need to do is build its reliability, and that's where we've been neglecting for years. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
Councilor Rudd, while that is in fact true, and many of us are on board with the idea of larger users paying increased share, it doesn't change the circumstance for the guy who lives next door to you, or the constituent who will call you later on about the issue.
No, I agree, but
you don't get to ignore.
If you sold a whole bunch more water, you wouldn't have to raise their rate. You would get the revenue.
I understand that idea. That he already made that clear when he essentially said we're going to raise the rates because they're not using as much anymore, which is not a good reason, to be quite frank. Not when people are being told not to use as much water. Not a good argument.
And perhaps funding a water department through that mechanism didn't make any sense either.
Is that sarcasm?
No, I'm saying I don't disagree with you, but that's the situation that we're in. That's how the water department is funded, through.
I understand that, but let me be blunt, Corey. The sarcasm is not necessary. The bottom line is this: people.
That wasn't being sarcastic.
Listen, I'm gonna be very direct with you. All right. So what you're talking about is people's livelihood. All right. And then I get that the administration may not really care that much about people's livelihood. The rest of us do. I'm gonna say what it is. And let's be clear, you gotta watch your tone. I'm not your peer. Okay. So the thing we have to understand is this: we have a job to do to protect the constituents from this kind of situation.
And I'm saying it's a conversation. It's a conversation to have. If you think that we've swung too far one way,
somebody to choke, but allow me to correct you.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor.
Yeah.
Is that sarcasm?
Commissioner, do you have anything that needs to go on the agenda for the next meeting that we would need to pass for this?
Well, this was what we were looking at, so I think we need some additional conversation on this, and I'll get some more information. We may have to revisit this in a couple weeks at the next committee meeting.
Okay. You don't have any immediate items for the next meeting?
No, I don't.
Thanks. Any other questions from the councilors?
I don't have any. Thank you. Councilor Green. Commissioner Corey.
So Green, I'm all set.
Thank you, counselors.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.